Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our second session of Equity Ain't Dirty. I am so excited to have these conversations with other people who are engaged in this work, who are working to leave this world better than we found it. This session is so important to me, talking about equity and what it really means, especially in light of the confusion and some of the narrative that's happening nationally, and even within Washington state. What does equity mean? I hope that through these conversations, you leave with a clear understanding, but also you get to understand some of the real work that's happening, and you leave with more clarity. Also, I hope that it leaves you with an idea of maybe ways that you can contribute to ensure that our world is a better place once we're no longer here. I don't believe equity is dirty. And I think that after these conversations, you'll leave feeling the same way. And with that, I am thrilled to one, let you know who I am. My name is Megan Matthews. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the director for Washington State's Office of Equity. I am a lifelong Washington resident, and I am proud to be a state employee, a longtime state employee. And I'm very excited to be in this space doing this work with such wonderful colleagues and peers, mentors, and others. So, with that, I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Lisa Keating, who is the director for Washington State's LGBTQ Commission. I'm so grateful to just be in Lisa's presence every time I'm with her. And so I'm excited for you to meet her as well. And Lisa, I'll pass it to you to to tell us some more about yourself.
Hi, Megan. I'm so excited to be here. As you said, my name is Lisa Keating. My pronouns are she, her. And I joined the Washington State LGBTQ Commission in August of last year. So there's been significant transition between August and now. And it is truly a deep honor to have been it's an honor to have the opportunity to continue the work that the former director Manny Santiago began in standing up the commission in 2019. So it's just an honor because there's been so many successful points of the commission and meeting its purpose in a very short period of time throughout a pandemic. So I'm just really honored that I get to contribute and add to the work that's already been done. I also am a lifelong Washingtonian and pretty proud of it. I love traveling to other places, and then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to come home. So Washington 100% feels like home to me. And I'm really, it's a great privilege to be able to do work on behalf of the people of Washington. Um, and prior to joining the commission, I've been in advocacy work and education work on LGBTQIA issues for over 15 years with a real focus on youth and families in the K-12, in the public education space, and then also in healthcare, just around like, what does it mean to support families with LGBTQIA youth, trans and non-binary youth? What are the needs of those youth? And how do we make sure that they're safe, included, and have equal opportunity to their cis straight peers to succeed and thrive? And I had done quite a bit of that work on a national scale with a national organization working with families raising trans and non-binary kids from around the country. And one thing that experience has taught me that I think is really relevant with Washington State and the work of the LGBTQ Commission is that there are misunderstandings about where people live geographically. And if someone lives in a specific geographical area, then there's assumptions about the values of people that live in specific areas. And what I learned with working with people in Utah, Michigan, Ohio, North Carolina, Texas, Arizona, Connecticut, Like I met people from every walk of life and experience, and where they lived, and they where they live doesn't determine their values, right? The state politics don't determine their values. And so it was really refreshing to meet so many people in smaller rural areas that are doing unbelievable things to support and love and care for their trans and non-binary kids. And so I just know, like, I carry that work with me, thinking about how large our state is and really how geographically diverse our state is. So I'm really, I find that to be a really inspirational challenge, to meet people and be in conversation with people to help them better understand um, who who the people within the LGBTQIA community are.
I love what you were sharing, Lisa, because I think it's so important. When we think about how we prejudge one another, I think, geography is absolutely a part of that. Um, and I learned the same lesson, for me. And as I, was new into the director role with the Office of Equity and travel around Washington State, it was important for me to meet with our state legislators to understand what's important to them, because I see us as partners in driving state government in the direction that we all want. And I believe that through communication and listening and valuing each other's voices and valuing each other as human beings, that we can get there together. And I was really, I had some great meetings, met some in some great local coffee shops. Um, and I 100% agree that I don't really think, for the most part, we're that far away from each other. And because of our geographic location, advances in technology have helped us to become closer, but in some ways, we're still pretty far apart. And that separation, that physical separation, contributes to misunderstandings. So, in your perspective, one, how do you see the LGBTQIA plus community as part of equity? What does equity mean to you? And what's or some of the misconceptions?
Hmm, that's a really great question, and very layered. I think one of the first things that comes to mind that I think about often is that the existence and the lives of um, LGBTQIA people has been politicized, and not by them, not by us, right? We didn't choose. And what I, my approach to equity is making sure that I'm being conscious and intentional about the recognition that people hold multiple identities. And the queer community is very much an amazing representation of the multitude of identities that people hold within race, ethnicity, religion, native, indigenous, immigrant status, like their language. There are, experiences in poverty, and like where people come in a fit into a social economic position. And so for me, equity is I have a dear friend and a mentor that had talks about equity as, or not, excuse me, not equity, but privilege, as things you don't have to think about, that you live through daily. And for myself, there are a lot of things I don't have to navigate or think about on a daily basis. There are a lot of things that I do, but I work and I practice at being mindful about where are the intersections that I don't have to navigate, either personally or within those in my immediate circle. Um, as an example, I don't have to think about disability access in the same way that others do. And that is definitely an area of growth, and I know a blind spot because I don't have to think about it. So it is something I have to work at, being mindful. So as an example, like that is a piece of equity work. And I know that the term privilege and bias have been maybe at times overused, maybe used in ways that aren't accessible to people. But what I appreciate about my friend and mentor, the way that he talks about privilege, is it really is as simple as, do I have to think about when I go out of my home, do I have to think about mobility, access, right? And if I'm not, dealing with an injury, the answer almost most of the time is no. And so I don't move through the world having to navigate mobility access. And so that's just like, I think, an important example that I use around helping people, inviting people in to considering what are some ways that we can think about privilege that isn't in a way that shuts people down. And some of that, that approach has really come from I'm the parent of a trans now young adult. And we navigated a world, like I was her first line of defense, especially as a young kid. And I was the one that like broached like whatever the barriers were going to be, right? So I moved through the world in a way that a lot of my friends who were raising kids the same age, that they didn't have to think about, right? So for me, it is like helping educate people and inviting people in to be curious. And I know you, Megan, talk a lot about curiosity, and the importance of curiosity. And I think for this moment in time, which is different yet not different for queer folk, um, there's a lot that's the same in terms of the rhetoric, the accusations, the exclusion, the targeting. All of that has existed for multiple of years, which, as we start to head into Pride season, you know, was a moment in history over 50 years ago where some trans women were like, not just trans women, but they were like, we're done. We're not going to be allowed. You're not going to treat us like this anymore without us pushing back. And so I think there's a lot of an unbelievable progress that has been made. Our state has been honestly a beacon for over 20 years in continuously working to improve the lives and protect the rights of LGBTQIA people.
I love that. You had so many gems in there. And I love when we talk about privilege and, you're saying that it's not having to think, not having to plan around something, right? Not having to adjust um, because of whatever the circumstance of the environment may be. I love that. And I also think, as part of that conversation, it's important that folks remember we're not saying it's your fault. Because oftentimes when we have to navigate that conversation, it's because people then, especially when we're talking about race, I remember 2020, I had a lot of conversations with people who said, but it's not my fault. And I said, absolutely. It's none of our faults, and it's all of our responsibility, right? And I love when we talk about, some really specific examples that um, many people can relate to. I like talking about elevators right? And a lot oftentimes the environment that is created through government policies and practices. It creates an environment that privileges some folks and creates barriers or hardships or obstacles for other groups. And when we think about the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, that required elevators in buildings, and so today we experience taller buildings because now that we don't have to walk up all the flights of stairs, we can build buildings taller, which is, I think, a little bit better for the environment than these big buildings that take up a lot of um, in space. But now people who can't navigate stairs don't have to try to crawl up the stairs or pull themselves up the stairs, right? Which is not being treated with dignity and respect, right? Their ability to access a higher floor or other spaces is the same as ours, or people who do not need to use elevators to access. But we can now choose, because I sure do. I said, how many stairs, how many flights of stairs do I need to go up? Yeah, we're using the elevator on this one. Yep, we sure are. Right. So these things benefited us all, and yes, it requires a little more thought at the beginning. It requires a little more money, right? But these benefits us all because now more people can participate. Think about if, there was a building and somebody's job was on the third or fourth floor. That means they no longer have the ability to apply and compete for that job. And now through access, through their ability to get to that floor where the office is located, they have the ability to compete for that job if they want to. So when we're thinking about equity, and so you can apply that more broadly, right? Um, you may not have to navigate that challenge or that condition or that space, but we're better off because we're allowing more people to participate and compete in and exist in these spaces in a dignified and humane way. And so by creating more opportunity and more access for others, we're helping us all. And that same concept should apply to any group of people. It should apply to every group of people. So that's why I love what you were saying, and I was like, yes, that's so necessary. And I love that we're taking examples that people may, more readily relate to apply to ones that they may not be as familiar with. To say, so do you think the same should apply for this? These groups and this thing and this scenario that may not affect you, but you know what? The indirect benefits we may not even realize yet.
I mean, when you care for the least of us, it benefits all of us.
Yes. And I also want to encourage those who are listening to, if you're hearing us use terms or language that you're not familiar with, most of us have access to at our fingertips to Google and other search engines or other people who may be able to help give you some background. We're not actually going to dive into defining those terms at this point because there's so many sources out there available for you. So I just encourage you to do what you can to get informed about what we're talking about.
Google is free,
Uh,
friends. Google is free.
what are some of the misconceptions about it, and how do you work to address those misunderstandings? And maybe I know you talked about like when you're having conversations, but what do you think if we're getting into the policy space?
Um, I think, gosh, well, the first thing that came to mind when you asked misconceptions about equity for me is this idea that it's taking something from someone and giving it somewhere else, right? It's like stripping someone of some perceived benefit or privilege or access to something and saying, well, you don't get to have this anymore. We're going to give it to this group over here. Um, and I think that that is definitely a misconception and really comes from scarcity and the idea that, we have to compete against each other, right? We're really very much conditioned to believe that we are competing against each other to fulfill to fulfill basic needs, in careers, like on a playground. If you're a parent on a playground, man, there's just so much pressure that can get people to believe that we are truly in competition with one another rather than in a shared community, right? Shared society. And I think that that is a big misconception. And again, there's lots of reasons for that. And there's a lot of reasons that those who oppose equity and inclusion, there are reasons that they don't, right? Like, because I think it is rooted in this idea of, scarcity, and you will not take this from me. It belongs to me because I was born me. And I think that that mentality is very destructive and dangerous. And in terms of policy, we can see this playing out federally, and in response at a state level around the existence of trans and non-binary people. They are very much they continue to be at the center of what is for some deeming the fall of society, which is ridiculous and dumb. Trans people have been with us forever. They've always existed. And this isn't the first time and or the first country or government that has come to erase the existence of this population either, which I think is really important to name. And when it comes to policy, in the ways that the federal government continue to try and target and erase trans people from existing, and even I think it's important to say trans females, like they are very much at the center of all of this. That as hard as the federal government is trying to deny the existence of an entire population in policy, right? Through policy, whether executive order driven by then how state or federal agencies act upon those executive orders, whether it's Congress determining, federal gender affirming care bans through, for militaries raising trans youth. The state has countered, right? They continue to provide a counter through policy of those actions and standing firm on the rights and the protections that have been established, some for 20 years or almost 20 years through policy. And so I think you can see that dichotomy continuing to play out. And it is a really unnerving experience and thing to watch the depth and experience the depth that the federal government and this current administration is willing to go. That part is very unsettling because we knew it, but then living it, right? They said it, now they're doing it. And that difference, right? It's the difference. I recalled, as we were waiting from election to inauguration, I called that sort of the long anticipation, right? Because we can imagine all the things. What are they going to really follow through with? How are they going to enact these things that they're saying they want to see? But then living those experiences come with another level of, honestly, trauma, stress, anxiety. And I know that, trans folks aren't the only ones being targeted, right? Seeing what's happening to Black and brown communities is just what's happening to immigrant and undocumented people is, I don't have a family-friendly word for it. But it is definitely, it goes against everything I believe about humanity. Um, and to see the targeting of specifically Black women in positions through federal government, through the military, it is very much an attack on all of the work that is done collectively. And at the same time, a good reflection of the importance of the work that we are doing, and that the work we are doing is making a difference, because there wouldn't be such a dramatic escalation of reaction, right, if we weren't making progress.
That's true. When you talk about fear, right? We're talking about fear, and that the this our cities, our states, our nation is changing, and that brings a lot of fear for folks. Well, will there be a space for me because of the scarcity mindset? We think of it like a race. There's a clear winner and clear loser in when you're in sports, right? And when you're racing and basketball and football, and we like to get together and cheer for our team. And at the end of the day, there's usually not a tie, right? There's usually a winner and a loser. But we can't think about, like what you said, we can't think about this like that. And it's an ecosystem. What happens to one person affects another, right? And you can see this through data. When poverty is high, crime is high. When people don't have what they need, the essentials they need, we're all worse off. So from any sort of, even if it's not I'm not pulled in an empathetic way for another person's suffering. From a business strategy, then return on investments, it makes more sense to make sure that our communities are healthy, because we are all better off. We can continue investing in education or jails. Right? So I think we really need to think about it in a real way, that it doesn't cost as much as we may think it is to invest in each other, and we're all better off for it. But if we choose to go down a path that says we don't care about people suffering, the cost of the consequences of those actions and choices, are to me, are more expensive. It's more expensive to run a prison and a jail than it is to make sure kids have education and they're fed during the day, and people have a stable house or a place to lay their head at night, and affordable. So I love what you were talking about, that there is that fear that, well, if we are letting people, if we're creating this space for people and things, that means that my world is changing. And I say, if we go back to the elevator, yes, it requires more intention. Yes, it requires more money, but we're all better off for it. So demographics are changing. The culture is always changing, right? Yes, those things are changing around us, and it may be scary, but I guess I would challenge folks who may be scared of people they have not interacted with, or are fearful, or, don't know what to expect. Have a conversation with folks. Listen or view any of the documentaries around. Folks, there's a ton of documentaries about the experience of different communities, interviews with people, that sort of thing. Just take an opportunity and watch. And I think you'll find more in common with yourself, and I think you'll also find that those communities are really trying to create a space where we can all thrive. This isn't about replacing one group for another. This isn't about saying we want us to be on the top and you to be on the bottom. That's not what this is. This is saying we want us all to have access. That will require compromise, right? Because, like the elevator, that's a very real thing. We had to plan that. Everybody has to plan that into buildings that are going to be more than one floor. So yes, it requires more intention and planning, and it may require compromise, but we'll all be able to thrive and we'll all be better off for it. And I think that, I just hope that it pulls a little bit at your heartstrings whenever you see anybody suffering. right? Even if you don't agree with the concept or the thought or who they are, you know, I just hope that it pulls a little at your heartstrings when you know people are suffering. I just think that that is, maybe it's not unique to human beings, but I hope that we don't lose that. Um, because at the end of the day, like you were saying, we are social beings, and also this idea that, people might say, "Oh, well, now see, their state employees getting political." Every state employee is political because we all implement and influence and create policy. Politics is about policy. Now, the national discourse and things like that, where some people are, talking about each other and calling people, I don't I don't know what that is. Theatrics, I don't know, but it's not politics to me. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, like the ADA, the example I gave earlier, where the government created new policy that created access for people. We're talking about policies and practices that are hurting people, right? People are suffering, people are sad, people are upset, people are fearful because of things that are happening, because of the landscape around policies that say they cannot be who they are, access the medical care they need, go out and work or go to church because they're scared about being safe and being able to return home. These are some of the real fears people have because of government policies and actions. And I want to be very clear about that, that absolutely is something that is relevant for state employees to be talking about.
Mhm. And I think too, like, there was the when the executive orders from the White House began to be signed, and the numerous ones specific around targeting trans people and trans identities. We did get some questions when we were doing community outreach about, like, how are these executive orders impacting you and your family. um, and in talking to people, like, there was a little pushback about, well, why are you engaging in what's happening federally? I'm like, well, what's happening federally is impacting the people in Washington that we are serving. And to understand what those impacts are, you have to be in conversation. You have to at least be in some kind of communication to assess what are the real implications. What are the actual, how are these policies being implemented, right? And when you had hospital systems, multiple hospital systems that were cutting off gender affirming care overnight, that created unbelievable chaos because it is protected in the state of Washington. So, to me, again, going back to what I said in the beginning, the existence of trans people has been politicized, not by trans people. They are living out the impacts and implications. And I think, as those that are in the work of policy, it is critically important for us to recognize that distinction, right? And then, where do our own policies at a state level, and for those that are overseeing local policy, how do your local and state policies intersect and or conflict with the changes of federal policy? Because, and then that's where the courts are so integral to this, determining, right? Like, how do the rights that we have fought for in the state of Washington for queer folk, how will that be challenged? Can that be challenged at a federal level? And then what's the recourse, right? What can we do to protect those critical pieces of policy that are helping to improve the lives of LGBTQIA people?
That's the crux of it, right? That we're supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people. What does it mean when when decisions are made about you, but you didn't get to inform
Mhm.
those actions? And this is what, when we talk about people who are systematically excluded, when you're not involved in that process to inform policies and practices from the government entity, um, then can we really say that we're a government of, by, and for the people? And now I know historically, right, it was always for some people, of, by, and for some people, right? We can go back to the Constitution, and there's a lot of people who aren't included in the originating documents. And I think that because we know that, and if we feel that people should be able to participate in their government, they should be seen as whole people and valued as whole people and have the ability for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then everybody should get to inform the policies and the practices of their government. And right now you have situations, and I mean, this has been historical in the United States, which makes me also want to say that telling a holistic history is important. Telling history from multiple perspectives is important. And that when we have those multiple perspectives, that's where you get to truth. And historically, we have not had all perspectives that got to inform history. And so history has been skewed. And because we're getting more and more perspectives into our history and the national narrative, some people feel like we're saying America isn't good. And what I'm saying is America is my home, Washington State is my home, and America is complicated. Okay. And we got a lot of work to do. Okay. Just like we say in state government. Yeah, we know we're not perfect in state government. I have a lot of peers who we know there's things we need to fix. And we are committed to fixing those. First, we have to acknowledge the truth that not everything is good and that we should want to fix those things to make our country, to make our state as strong as possible for now and into the future. And that the truth, it may hurt, but that's the only way we can fix what needs to be fixed. So I appreciate what you were sharing about that, and I think anybody would want to inform and influence their government, and so why should one group of people be able to influence over and without other people? And I think that's the conversation that people need to think about within themselves.
And I think like that is such a beautiful segue to like the importance of each of the commissions. And I think like that is such a beautiful segue to like the importance of each of the commissions. And so, each ethnic and community based commission is that conduit to a group of people that may or may not have always historically had access to informing and influencing and educating the policy. And so for our commission, like we are so fortunate because we are the largest commission. We have 15 commissioners from almost every region of the state. And we also have 12 youth council advisory members, ages 14 to 25, who are also from all over the state. And they collectively, we have a really rich group of people that are helping advise and inform and educate and do outreach and help us connect those resources and that information and the things that are happening in their communities to the governor's office, the legislature, and state agencies. And I think like the value that the partnerships between the commissions and the Office of Equity is so critically important, probably, and I may even like suggest more now than ever, given the landscape that we are in, to demonstrate why working collectively and collaboratively is essential. We will not be able to lift people up and have a Washington for all without collaboration. That is not possible because people will be siloed. People will be excluded or left out, whether intentionally, consciously, or not. It is just, unless you are actively engaging with the public to help inform what are the needs. What I like to talk about is what's working, what's not working, what's next, right? Like, how do we take in that information and then also help reflect back to those that we serve, that we recognize the differences and the needs and the complexities that people have, right, through state government. And then here's how we are continuing to move closer, right? We aren't there. We will probably never be there, whatever that is defined as, but we continue to work towards it, which I think is at the heart of equity, right? It is a continuum, and it is a practice of thinking and approach to how to continuously improve systems, because systems impact lives, and either those systems are improving those lives or they're harming those lives. And unless we are constantly in that conversation, then we will not be able to move this work forward.
So, Lisa, thank you so much for joining me in this discussion. I have immensely enjoyed it, and I agree. I'm so grateful for the collaboration and the partnership with you all, with the commissions. I 100% agree that there's no way we can make the systems change we need to advance a Washington for all, make sure government is working with people and instead of doing things to people. Um, and absolutely, the expertise you all bring because of your connections are critical to guiding us forward. There's so much work to be done. We need so many hands doing the work, right? Ultimately, it will involve us all to advance and realize a real Washington for all. So I appreciate your support. I appreciate your partnership. I appreciate how we're able to lift each other up when we're down or when we're experiencing something bad, because it's hard work. It's hard work. And it feels so much more possible because we're not alone. So I wanted to leave you with one question: is in one or two sentences, can you tell us why equity ain't dirty?
Mm. Equities for everybody.
I love that. So lastly, how can people stay engaged with you and the work of the commission?
Well, please, you can visit our website, Washington or lgbtq.wa.gov, I think. I should know our website by heart, but now I just got tested. But please, on our website, there you can sign up for our newsletter. That's a super great way to find out what's going on, not just with the commission, but also within the community. And we also often get articles written by our Youth Advisory Council members, which are unbelievable. And our commissioners also contribute to the newsletter as well. You can follow us on social media. We have a really great outreach through our social media. We are on Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. So you can pick your poison as far as social media goes, and follow us on there as well.
Great. Thank you again, Lisa. I just can't even express how much I really appreciate you and all the hard work you're doing. Just know, folks, Lisa fights tirelessly. She's very vocal, and I appreciate you. I appreciate how, we're able throughout this conversation to let folks know that creating space, creating an environment that is recognizes everyone's experiences does not mean that you will have less. This isn't a competition. It's an ecosystem, one that we need to all invest in, and that our humanity, as we as a human, you as humans benefit, when everyone is thriving. And I want to leave you with this question. Ask yourself, how can I contribute to equity in my daily life? How can I make things better for someone else in my community? And with that, I will leave you with the phrase to be well, but I also want to let you know that you are enough, you are seen, you are important, and you are not alone. And we will see you next time.